Is she going to come up? She's busy talking. Ship coming in tomorrow.
Hello.
Hello, how are you? Jim Cork and Lillian. And Stu White. Your present wife.
36 years.
How many years? 36?
Hello, John. Nice to meet you. How are you?
Oh, yes, John.
John, sorry, John. No, no, no.
After 30 years in Spain, they gave them freedom.
Well, thank you.
Hi.
Hello. Hello, I'm very well.
Last year? Last year?
I was here last year. I was here, God, I've been here a couple of years.
Did you see the DVD?
No, I didn't, no.
Oh, yeah.
No, I didn't. Did you make a DVD of the whole thing?
Oh, no.
Yeah. Is this, no, is this the one that the lads made, the long one that was given to my sister Liz to see what bit she liked?
Probably.
And then you've now edited it down, is that?
No, in 50 minutes.
Oh God, I'd love to see that. I haven't seen, but it wasn't, when I last inquired about it, it wasn't ready yet. When was it ready? I knew it was coming, so I didn't realise it was coming. I knew it was coming. And I know when Liz was talking to me about it last, that
I think proceedings on the way today, ladies and gentlemen, we'll have the raising of the national flag first. The laying of the reed ceremony, a reed laying on behalf of the Béal Bláth Committee by Liam Fahey, and anybody else that has a reed, would they please come forward with it now. The second read was on behalf of the Michael Collins Committee in Middleton, led by John Healy, and the other one was on behalf of young Fine Gael. I have a very sad announcement to make at the commencement of today's ceremony. Unfortunately, our great friend and attender here every year, Liam Burke, passed away this morning at 11 o'clock. It's obviously by the reaction from the crowd, it's a shock to everybody, it's a shock to us here as well. So we will have a minute's silence now in remembrance of Liam Burke. Thank you kindly. We now call on Archdeacon Michael O'Brien to say a few prayers for all our intentions, especially for all those who passed away recently, particularly in the last 12 months, that were associated with Béal Bláth. Archdeacon.
Thanks, Frank. First of all, I would like to say a prayer for not only Liam Burke, but his family and his wife. He was a very, very good friend of mine, and I want to pray for the happy repose of his soul. So I will say 3 Hail Marys for the happy repose of his soul, and for his wife, and for his family, and his brothers and sister Mary. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit. May his big soul and the souls of all the faithful departed, through the mercy of God, rest in peace. And now, dear Amish, on Kidrun Dever Glorver, Ashari Christo Wariv, son Nadina Eta Emma Rowing, a Viach and saw Hannah, Ebian Law. All now at our nav, going if your time go down the rear, put into the other and Darman Nitra nav. Should have I would have thrown the grass at Auntie and the lad span a hood of an August, a span a torrent of Rinny Isa. Should have I would have thrown the grass at Auntie and the lad span a hood of an August, span a torrent of Rinny Isa. Should have I would have thrown the grass at Auntie and the lad span a hood of an August, span a torrent of Rinny Isa. Should have I would have thrown the grass at Auntie and the lad span a hood of an August, span a torrent of Rinny Isa. Should have I would have thrown the grass at Auntie and the lad span a hood of an August, span a torrent of Rinny Isa. Should have I would have thrown the grass at Auntie and the lad span a hood of an August, span a torrent of Rinny Isa. Should have I would have thrown the grass at Auntie and the lad span a hood of an August, span a torrent of Rinny Isa. Should have I would have thrown the grass at Auntie and the lad span a hood of an August, span a torrent of Rinny Isa. Should have I would have thrown the grass at Auntie and the lad span a hood of an August, span a torrent of Rinny Isa. Should have I would have thrown the grass at Auntie and the lad span a hood of an August, span a torrent of Rinny Isa. Lord, and I agus and Voxes is a nev. Yeshte Greb Anamaka Galair, Agus Anamaka Namarov Ilik. In Anamanahar, Agus the speak, Agus the spread nev. Amen. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Archdeacon. Those on the platform today, ladies and gentlemen, are Senator Jim Higgins, our guest speaker, Archdeacon Michael O'Brien, the Mayor of Cork County, Michael Creed, the deputising for the Lord Mayor of Cork, Deirdre Clune is Councillor Jim Carr and his wife Lillian, the Mayor of Macroom, Tommy Coonan, the Mayor of Cove, Stella Mead, and the Mayor of Fermoy, Aileen Pine. And also we have Helen Hall representing the Collins family. And our friend Derek Collins, Secretary. And the man who gets no recognition here every year is Tommy Connell, the man who raises the flag and has been doing so here, I think, since the early 50s. And he's also our financial controller and looks after the few bob that we gather every year to keep the show on the road. Also, we have on the platform the Brazilian ambassador to Ireland, Stelio Marcos Amatini, and his wife, Marie Lisa. You're all very welcome here to Béal na Bláth again today for the 83rd commemoration of the death of Michael Collins, one of the greatest leaders that this country has ever known. He was a man who showed great leadership qualities. He was a man of great integrity, honesty, and unselfishness. And those three traits were brought home to me very recently when I visited the Michael Collins Centre in Clonakilty and see a bill that Michael Collins received a letter that Michael Collins wrote on the 4th of August 1922. It was a letter to a solicitor, Thomas Healy in Skibbereen, telling him apparently Michael Collins had been canvassing in Cork sometime previously and had hired, presumably after coming off the train, had hired a car in Cork from Johnson and Perez, and the bill that came from Johnson and Perez for the hire of the car for 5 days. He was instructing the solicitor in Skibbereen that the full amount of the bill should not be paid out of election expenses because he used the car on some of the 5 days himself for his own personal use. It makes one wonder if some of the leaders that came after Collins lived by the same principles, would we have the Greek culture that we have in Ireland today? I doubt it very much. And no less an authority than Peter Barry told me since then that the bill was eventually written off by Johnson and Perez. It was written off in its entirety. So that brings me, ladies and gentlemen, to our guest speaker today, Senator Jim Higgins, MEP from Mayo, from Ballyharness in County Mayo. The first Mayo man, as far as to my knowledge, that has given the oration at Béal na Bláth. A man that is involved in politics most of his life. He was first elected to Mayo County Council in 1979 and has been a public representative ever since, both as a county councillor, as a TD, as a senator, and now as an MEP. When I contacted Jim Higgins first, about a month ago, to ask him if he'd come down here, the man nearly jumped down the phone with excitement. I think if I pressed him that morning, he would have come down there and then that day to deliver the oration. He said to me, Frank, he said, it's one of the greatest honours of my political career to be asked to officiate at Béal na Bláth. He's a man that is never afraid to speak out on something he believes in. A man like Collins, who has shown great leadership and has looked after his constituents when no one else would take up their cause. He took on the establishment and won. And I think there's great credit due to the man for the way he handled, and I don't have to go into the details of it because there's common knowledge what went on in Donegal, and he done a fantastic job in getting that problem sorted out for his constituency. And long may he continue to keep up the good work. So I call on Senator Jim Higgins now to deliver the oration.
Dus gur mágad Frank has socht cúpla focal molú sin, tá súlag am gohfuil siad tiltte. A cach éirle, bháil je clán míhala cholán, a bháil je cuiste cuimhnachán míhala cholán. Hachta dálaí, ardwéir, a wéir, ambassador, agus a gína úsla galéir idir tú agus cléir. Nuair a furas an Gléach ar an telefón ó Frank Medcalf mar a dúirte timplis mí ó hin. Ní rá is agam cad a bhí ar siúlaige, níor ág sé a iver agus a anam, an níor ág sé éon chapter tir bé. An nuair a glí mé a rais do Frank, fuair mé amach go rá sé ag tóirt dom mar a dúirte an unóir bhó a féidirlum a ghlacú leis a riomh. Mr. Chairman, members of the Collins family, distinguished guests, admirers of Michael Collins, ladies and gentlemen, as Frank Medcalf said when he telephoned me on my mobile phone several weeks ago, he simply left his telephone number and his name, but he didn't leave any message. And to be honest with you, at the time it was in the immediate wake of the second report on the Morris Tribunal, and I was besieged with telephone calls, particularly from the media, in relation to that particular saga, and I thought it might be yet another complainant about alleged Garda misconduct. But little did I realise, when I rang Frank Medcalf back, that I was to be accorded the greatest honour that I could ever have imagined. Frank was inviting me to deliver the annual commemoration oration from Michael Collins here in Béal na Bláth at today's ceremony. Now, on a personal note, if I can be pardoned for a minute, can I say that my late father, who died 40 years ago, must be smiling on high at today's occasion, because he was a hugely ardent admirer of Michael Collins. He had seen Collins on a platform in Castlebar in 1921 with my late father's granduncle, who was then chairman of Mayo County Council. And my father was totally enchanted and captivated by the sheer power and the sheer magnetism of Collins. His personality, his power, but particularly the passion of his oratory. Now, a bit of history. I went to secondary school in St. Charles College, Tuam. And as a 12-year-old, the priest who was teaching us Irish at the time gave us our first essay. And it was under the title, An fear bhór tionchar ar síl na hÉirden le cúige bliain anuas. The man with the most influence on the life of Ireland for the past 50 years. And I asked my father, whom should I write about? And immediately and spontaneously he said, who else but Michael Collins? He was very good at Irish himself, and he gave me a lot of assistance with the essay, rhyming off Collins's traits, his achievements and his influence. Now, the priest, obviously, who was a Connemara man, wasn't quite obviously a Collins admirer, because when I got my essay back a week later, it was scrolled all over in red biro, and every single paragraph of it was littered with the word "me ceart" wrong. And when my father saw that, he went ballistic. He absolutely exploded, and he took all 16 and a half stone of them over to the priest's private room, and he arrived back about a half an hour later with a broad smile on his face and the comment, "That's so-and-so." And it wasn't so-and-so, it was a word that Michael Collins used to use from time to time. Got a right good lesson from me. He now understands his Irish history. 83 years ago tomorrow, at this sacred spot, one of the greatest tragedies in the troubled history of Ireland unfolded in a matter of minutes. The uprisings of the 16th and 17th centuries, as well as those of 1798, of 1803, the Young Ireland Rebellion of 1848, the Fenian Rebellion of 1867, and we remember here O'Donovan Rossa from this area, these were all vital expressions of defiant nationalism and defiant republicanism. But they all ended in failure. The failure was to achieve their immediate aim and objective, to rid Ireland of the neighbouring invader. The ruthless suppression of the 1916 Easter Rising, but particularly the execution, if you may call it that, of its 15 leaders, inflamed rather than extinguished that spirit. Nationalist Ireland was on the march, and there was no turning back. But the big question was, who could unleash this spirit? Was there somebody out there who, learning from the lessons of the past, could pull together and could harness this huge upsurge of nationalist fervour for one final push and one final assault? After all the centuries of failure, after all the bloodshed of the past, would this upsurge end in yet another false dawn? But thanks to the vision of Collins, thanks to his determination, thanks to his intelligence, as Frank said, thanks to the meticulous attention to detail of one man, a West Cork man, the might of Britain would be forced to succumb, and Ireland, after 700 years of bondage, would be a free nation, and the dismantlement of the powerful British Empire would be unstoppable. Recognising that the might of the British Army could not be defeated by conventional warfare methods, it was Collins who devised a whole new and effective strategy. The flying column, the ambush, guerrilla warfare and guerrilla tactics. It was Collins who recognised that after all of the failed and isolated uprisings of the past, success would only be achieved if the movement became a nationwide one. And he made it a nationwide one. His motto was, hit them hard, hit them often, hit them where it hurts, and hit them everywhere. It was Collins's genius and planning that infiltrated the sophisticated British intelligence network so that he knew well in advance what their plans were and could counteract them before their plans actually got off the ground. It was Collins who penetrated the hitherto impenetrable Dublin Castle, the very nerve centre of the foreign occupier. And it was Collins's integrity, it was Collins's charisma that engendered absolute trust and confidence in the legions who rallied behind his leadership. It was Collins's extraordinary leadership, his qualities, that after 700 years of a struggle for independence, that led to the unprecedented situation where Britain, realising that now Ireland was ungovernable, Lloyd George came looking for a truce and came looking for a ceasefire in July 1921. It was Collins's realism that underpinned his approach to the treaty negotiations, that while nationalist Ireland had been liberated, as the late Cardinal Conway said, you could not bomb 1 million Protestant Unionists into United Ireland. Collins saw the treaty as a stepping stone, while the Unionist oligarchy in the 6 counties were certainly in no mood for doing immediate business with their Free State brethren in the south. The partitionist mentality and the partitionist mindset of the next decade, and I want to stress this, it was as much the fault of southern governments as those in the north, that there should be no contact, good, bad or indifferent, between the two governments, two contiguous governments on this small island of Ireland for 50 years is just so incredible and such an indictment. I know there was a visit by Sean Lamass to the north and a visit by Terence O'Neill to the south, and these were historic, but they were only small step forward. Partitionism, and the longer that it went on, it provided the space and the scope and the opportunity for blatant, ruthless unionist majority domination over the nationalist minority. The reality is that while Articles 2 and 3 of Bunreacht na Sheridan laid claim to the 6 counties of Northern Ireland, the nationalist government in the south for 50 years effectively abandoned our fellow nationalists north of the border. While our Desh speeches were littered with the mandatory aspirations about a united Ireland and Ireland free as a nation once again, the truth is that for years southern governments stood idly by in the full knowledge that the civil rights of the minority of the Catholics in Northern Ireland were being trampled upon. But I find it very difficult to believe that a Collins-led Irish government would have turned such a blind eye. While Collins' first and immediate task, of course, would be the building up of the new Irish state, he would almost certainly have tackled the issue early on. And he would have tackled it on 2 fronts. First of all, by building bridges with the government in the north. And secondly, by intervening with the British government, who respected him at this stage and feared him as well, by insisting that the British government intervene in Northern Irish politics to ensure that the gerrymandering was stopped, that the anti-nationalist discrimination was stopped, that the political, if you like, abuses were stopped, that the anti-nationalist, anti-Catholic bias in housing policy and employment were stopped. And the abject failure to do so was the biggest factor that led to the festering sectarianism and polarisation that have brought about the misery, the mayhem and the murder of the sad recent 25-year period. Had the government in the south, as Collins certainly would have done, faced up to its responsibility to defend our beleaguered brethren in the north, we would not have had the sieges of the Catholic enclaves. We would not have had Bloody Sunday in Derry. We would not have had the atrocities on the British mainland. We would not have had the Provisional IRA. We would not have had the UVF, the UDA or the LVF. We would not have had the Columbia 3. And we would not have the worsened polarisation and sterility that afflicts Northern Ireland at present. What naturally goes through our minds at a time like this is the question of how Ireland and how Irish politics would have developed had Collins been allowed to live and to lead? Well, we can only conjecture, because sadly he was only 31 years of age at the time. But one of Collins's greatest assets was his single-mindedness and his organisational skills. I have no doubt that had Michael Collins lived, he would have welded together a political party which would be a dominant force in modern Ireland. While he attracted to himself lots of able, courageous, loyal and dedicated followers, Collins had that indefinable something that only truly great leaders possess. And what would you think of the legacy of Ireland in 2005? Well, can I say I had the honour of being Minister of State at the Department of Defence for 2.5 years, from 1995 to 1997. And as Minister of State, I visited Cyprus, Syria, Jerusalem and South Lebanon on 2 occasions to see at first hand and to inspect the work of the Irish troops as they proudly wore the blue beret of the United Nations. And the force commander in South Lebanon told me, General Karol Wozniak, he told me that he had 6 contingents under his command, keeping the Israeli-backed South Lebanese militia and the Hezbollah rebels apart. And he said to me that, he said, Minister, when I want a delicate job to be done, I send for the Irish. And he described them, he described the Irish Army wearing the blue beret of the United Nations, not alone as peacekeepers, but as peacemakers. And I thought to myself, my God, wouldn't Collins be so proud of the National Army of which he was the first Commander-in-Chief? And what would he think of the Current Garda Síochána, the civic guards established to keep law and order? Well, I think first of all he'd be very proud that his grandniece, Nora Ono, who unfortunately can't be with us today, was Minister for Justice for almost a 3-year period and indeed had the responsibility for looking after the Garda Síochána. And I think that he would be equally proud of the fact that the force is still one of the few unarmed police forces in the world. But I suspect that Michael Collins would be disgusted at the manner in which the force's fine reputation has been sullied by the criminal behaviour of the Gardaí in Donegal. Under Collins, the perpetrators would not have been allowed to retire on gratuities and golden handshakes and full pension rights, or in some cases transferred on active duty to Dublin and elsewhere. Collins would have booted them unceremoniously from the force. And what would he think of the performance of the politicians of the modern era? I think he would be turning in his Glasnevin grave that some of the inheritors of his unselfish legacy, as Yeats called it, fumbled in the greasy till and took hundreds of thousands in bribes for political favours that has given rise now to tribunals costing you, the taxpayer, millions and millions of pounds. And would he have approved of Ireland's participation in Europe? I believe that he'd be very proud of the fact that the Ireland that he liberated and the Ireland that he founded is now a proud, full and equal partner in the most successful political experiment in history, and which sees de Gaulle's dream of a united Europe from the Atlantic to the Urals on the brink of realisation. And I know that he'd take a particular pride in the fact that Irish, the language that he learned and loved, is at last recognised as an official working language within the European Union. But on the negative side, he'd be very disappointed that the language which he loved, which he learned, and which he embraced so wholeheartedly, and he always signed his name in Irish, Micheál Cullen, that a language which is such a distinctive part of our nationality and nationalism is not spoken more widely. As regards the Celtic Tiger, I'm sure that Collins would approve. But as Minister for Finance, Collins sketched out his vision of the economic potential of the new Free State. As Chrissy Osborne illustrates in her beautifully written book, Michael Collins Himself, Collins foresaw huge prospects for the development of Ireland's natural resources, a modern, well-equipped fishing fleet, the development of forestry and the forestry department in order to plant the bare mountains of this country, a nationwide electricity system based on hydro and peat burning plants. A man of his time, a man truly ahead of his time. But there is one thing of which I am absolutely confident. Michael Collins would have frowned at the fact that one of our richest modern natural resources, the natural gas find of County Mayo, is being given away literally for nothing to a foreign company. No royalties, a derisory tax rate, and massive write-offs. I think that's a scandal. Who knows that under Collins' shrewd economic management, Ireland would not have experienced the economic doldrums, the unemployment, and the mass immigration that afflicted us for generations. About 20 minutes by road from where I live is the grave of Michael's sister, Kitty. She was a primary teacher in Carragown National School, Bohola, County Mayo. Her home, which is perfectly preserved to this day, is less than 10 minutes drive from the birthplace of the Land League founder, Michael Davitt. And in a recently published school reunion magazine, I just by accident happened to come across the description of Kitty Collins as follows. Kitty Sheridan, and I quote, "Nee Collins, was appointed as assistant teacher in Carragown in the early 1900s and became principal later. She retired in the late 1940s. She was from Cork and a sister of the late great Michael Collins. She is remembered as dignified and as generous. She prepared many of her pupils for special occasions like Holy Communion and Confirmation in more than a spiritual way, as she often washed and dressed those who found themselves in a less fortunate situation than most. She was also blessed with a good singing voice and sang in the local church choir. She was married to Joe Sheridan, Bohola, brother of Martin Sheridan, Olympic champion." End of quote. Now, as a matter of interest, Kitty's brother-in-law, Martin Sheridan, is probably the greatest Irish all-round athlete of all times, having won 5 gold Olympic medals for the shot put, the hammer, and the pole vault. He won 12 North American championships and was the holder of 16 world records. And so impressed, in fact, was King Constantine of Greece at Martin's performance in Athens in the Olympics of 1906 that he commissioned a special statue of Martin which stands in one of the main squares in Athens to this day. Unfortunately, he was wearing the singlet of the United States. One has to muse, I think, how somebody from Woodfield in West Cork found their way 160 miles up to the heartland of County Mayo and fell in love with a Mayo man. But love transcends all. Can I thank you for your hospitality and your attention? I'm sure that some of you, a lot of you, the older folk in the audience will remember a West Cork man who used to be a regular panellist on the Late Late Show in the days of black and white television by the name of Matt Doolin. And Matt invariably asked any guest to come on the show, but do you not think that the people of West Cork are particularly friendly? And to that question I can say a resounding yes. Not alone particularly friendly, but resilient, brave, proud and Gaelic. But let us remember today, ladies and gentlemen, as well, the men and the women who stood shoulder to shoulder with Collins. Arthur Griffith, Dick Mulcahy, George O'Sullivan, Sean McKeown, Nancy O'Brien, Joe O'Reilly, and the countless others. You nurtured in your midst here in West Cork the greatest of all Irishmen, from Woodfield to London, from London to Dublin, from the GPO to Franga, from Franga back to Dublin, from Dublin to his own beloved West Cork, and from West Cork to posterity. Can I just advance? I don't have a great singing voice, but I'm going to say, advance something and attempt to sing something. The curlew stood silent and unseen in the long dark grass, and as he looked down on the roadway that winds its way through Béal na Bláth, and the young men running forwards and backwards, bobbing and weaving and cursing, as the bullets rained down on them from the hillside opposite. Suddenly, the firing stopped, and a lone figure lay on the roadside, dressed in green greatcoat, leggings, and dark hobnail boots that would never again set the sparks flying from the kitchen flagstones as he danced his way through a half-set. A hurried, whispered act of contrition. And the firing breaks out again, and the curlew takes to flight. And as he flies out over the dark, bare hills of West Cork, with his lonesome call, he would tell the world that the big fellow has fallen and that Michael is gone. On the far off autumn day, cold young men in ambush lay, on the roadside near a hill where flowers grow. So much hate for one so young, who was right and who was wrong. Though 1,000 years may pass, we'll never know. Candles dripping blood, they placed beside your shoulder. Rosary beads like teardrops on your fingers. Friends and comrades standing by, in their grief they wonder why. Michael, in our hour of need you had to go. And when evening twilight came, gently fell the autumn rain. Oh, but you lay still and silent on the ground, as we held our head in prayer. In our sorrow and despair, we wondered, was it friend or foe that shot you down? Candles dripping blood, they placed beside your shoulder. Rosary beads like teardrops on your fingers. Friends and comrades standing by, in their grief they wonder why. Michael, in their hour of need you had to go. Now the flame that you held high, as you cried out to the sky, to end this senseless killing and this shame, has now passed to other hands and is carried through the land by some not even fit to speak your name. Candles dripping blood, they placed beside your shoulder. Rosary beads like teardrops on your fingers. Friends and comrades standing by, in their grief they wonder why. Michael, in their hour of need you had to go. Michael, in our hour of need, why did you go? Yesterday got our anam the ekimage elehegerit.
Thank you, Jim. You certainly brought a new dimension to delivering the oration of Béal Bláth, didn't it? I now call on Helen Hoare on behalf of the Collins family to a word of thanks on their behalf.
Distinguished guests, friends and supporters, you are very welcome indeed to this commemoration service on the death of my granduncle Michael Collins. It is my very happy task to thank Mr. Jim Higgins for his knowledgeable, challenging and inspirational talk. With his beautiful Mayo Irish and his wonderful singing voice, one could well understand how a West Cork woman might admire a Mayo man. Leader and leadership are words readily associated with Michael Collins. As a leader, Michael Collins passed the acid test of good leadership. He did not shirk the hard decision. He faced opposition all the way, but steadfastly held on to what he believed was right, and eventually paid the ultimate price. Michael Collins gave his life to create a nation forged together by the spirit of the people, who would, in his vision, re-establish their Irish identity through language, the arts, music, education, and enterprise. He brought about enormous change, and many people were frightened by that change. Through over 80 years of dedication to education, good community spirit, strong literary, artistic, and music voices, and a wonderfully vibrant and spirited young population, we have recaptured our identity and gained a true sense of place. Our country has taken its place among the nations of the world. We are now standing at the crossroads, the same crossroads where Michael Collins stood. His task was to bring about the birth of our nation and to nurture and sustain it through its infancy. The nation has been born. We have gone through our childhood and our adolescence. We should, by now, be grown up. Our task, our dilemma is to decide what kind of an adult nation we are to be. In his own writings, Michael Collins urged that we have to build up a new civilization on the foundations of the old. No soft road, a hard road, but inspiring and exalting. Our strength as a nation, he said, will depend on our economic freedom and upon our moral and intellectual force. In these, he said, we can become a shining light in the world. Over the past 10 years, we have grown steadily towards economic freedom, the fruits of which can be witnessed all over the country. This is new for us as a nation. Our moral and intellectual force has in the past been a shining light in the world. Our voice, because of our past, and because of leaders like Collins, has been heard louder than the voices of the more materially powerful nations. As we move towards the adult phase of our growth, are we still a potent moral and intellectual force? Racism, discrimination, and disadvantage are not popular topics. It can be difficult for us individually to address these issues. It is hugely challenging for a nation to confront these issues nationally and globally. Because of this discomfort, there can be a tendency towards ambivalence and indeed complete avoidance of the issue. In this, are we denying our capacity for being a true moral and intellectual force? Are we being true to the ideals of Collins and indeed the traditions established internationally since the foundations of this state? Today's global village and our membership of the European Union place a responsibility upon us to participate on the world stage as a defender and advocate of democracy. Yet, paradoxically, democracy is under some pressure in Ireland at present. One symptom is the decreasing voter turnout for Oireachtas and local elections. Even more paradoxically, it appears that our recent prosperity may contribute to this apathy. People may not vote because they wish to protest or because they do not care for the choices on offer. However, by not voting, they simply endorse the final result. The rights of individuals are the pillars of democracy. These rights were hard-won over centuries. It is imperative that they are respected. All political parties that operate within a democratic system must support these rights. Political parties that operate within this framework can appear staid, particularly to younger voters. There is a tendency today to seek shortcut solutions to issues. These shortcut solutions can compromise people's rights. This is a short-sighted and potentially dangerous approach. As Peter Sutherland said at the centenary celebrations of Michael Collins' birth in 1990, issues are rarely black and white, and those who fail to respect the integrity of different points of view endanger our democratic society and even cost the lives of Irish men, women, and children. Strong and idealistic leadership, such as that provided by Collins, was never more needed. Open, visionary leadership, devoid of cynicism, was never more needed. We must not compromise our democratic standards. We must confront those political parties and politicians that would try to undermine our hard-won democratic rights. We must support those political parties and politicians that respect those rights and place them at the centre of the societies they wish to form now and in the future. We need truth. We demand truth. We demand honesty and right behaviour without taint of crime, violence or subversion. I believe our democracy is under serious threat. We cannot be ambivalent about this issue. Our fundamental quality of life depends on the maintenance of these rights. We must confront those that would seek to subvert them. We must ensure that the language used is clear and unambiguous. We must be vigilant that actions match words, that people walk the walk as well as talk the talk. We, all of us, must speak out and demand our public representatives to do likewise. We are at the crossroads of our life as a nation, and we can choose what kind of grown-up nation we wish to be. Let us build this new civilization, a multiracial, multicultural, just and honest society. Let us travel that hard but inspiring road as directed by Michael Collins. The Irish nation is the whole people, Collins said, of every class, creed and outlook. We recognise no distinction. The right of all the people must be secure. And from the death place of a great leader who did not shirk the hard decision, from here today, I raise this challenge to each and every one of you, to our leaders, Taoiseach, our political parties, to Sinn Féin, to our public representatives, and to our community leaders. Have the courage of Michael Collins in the face of opposition and lead this country forward into a new and mature nationhood, and help us to become a shining light in the world. I would like to conclude by offering my sincere condolences to the relatives and family of the late Mr. Liam Burke. My sincere thanks to Archdeacon O'Brien, to the Millstreet Band, the Irish Army, to Dermot Collins, Frank Medcalf and the Béal na Bláth Committee. I am deeply honoured to have been asked to speak on behalf of the Collins family. But most of all, thanks to you for your faithful attendance. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. I now call on Sergeant Jerry O'Connor and Sergeant Derek Doyle of the Irish Army to deliver the last post. Final word of thanks, ladies and gentlemen, to our guest of honour, Senator Jim Higgins, to Archdeacon Michael O'Brien, to the Engineering Division of Collins's Barracks Cork, who keep this monument in such good repair, to our trumpeter and drummer from the Irish Army, and to the Garda Síochána in Farnans under Sergeant Pat Meany and his team there. Local Cork County Council Engineer Raymond Crowley and Mr. Dargan Kiley, the local landowner who kindly lets us use his field up here for a car park every year. And to every one of you who came here today, again, a word of thanks. And before I go, a little commercial. We have a DVD called Simply Mick, a documentary remembering Michael Collins, people and events of his times. It's, you know, Michael Collins's political life and his life in the Irish Army has been very well documented over the years, but this is a personal documentary of his life from the time he was born, or before he was born actually, tracing back the family before he was ever born, and right through his life where he went to school and where he lived in different parts of Ireland and in England. And it's a cradle to the grave documentary of Michael Collins's personal life, and we're silly to defray our expenses here in Béal na Bláth every year. So it is after the Millstreet Band, whom I forgot to thank you very much, lads and lassies. After the national anthem, it's on sale both sides of the monument here. Thank you all very much indeed, and we'll have the national anthem now.
One, two.
you that were here last year, there's a good chance that your mugshot is appearing on this DVD and video as well, because the cameraman here, D'Angelo Keller, doing all the camera work on the DVD.
Just get you looking here.
Particularly when they're trying to do a job.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed.
Listen, nice to meet you. Thanks.
Once my mass was yeah, you met her about.
I did.
After 12 years you came back.
Life
So you had met her.
Life. Remember I drove into
Okay. How are you? Oh, thanks. Thanks a million. Yeah.
Would you mind get a photograph?
Yeah, no problem. Delighted to. Thanks a million. Thanks very much. Yeah, well, I know. I know.
I met him before in the summer. He was very funny. I met him
Yeah, you just face the mic, yeah. Just the best way to face like that.
Okay.
Like that.
Right.
Back and forth,
Yeah,
even
but
though, that's
I
very good.
try to forget, so I'll
No,
leave
no,
it
no,
halfway.
right, that's fine.
Yeah. So, Bat Brosnan. And where are you from, Bat?
Kilcommon, Killarney.
Kilcommon.
Killarney.
And do you mind telling me what age you are, Bat? Not because a fine figure of a man.
Well, I was 90 years, the 20th of last November.
You're 90, going on 91. Oh, you'll be 91 soon.
Yeah.
Well, you're a great man. So what year were you were born in 1914? Yeah, in Kilcommon.
Yeah.
And you're here today at the commemoration of the death of Michael Collins.
Yes.
And have you been coming for years?
I came here first in 1933. I think it was General Lorna Duffy that
gave the oration.
Gave the oration.
And was there many people here, Bet?
There was a big crowd. We farmed up at Kilmurray and marched. There was one line of blue shirts from Kilmurray down here to the monument.
Oh, that was the blue shirts.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And you walked down. How did you get up as far as here from Kilcommon?
We came in a lorry.
In a lorry?
Yeah.
Nice. And you were young then?
Ah, sure I was. Young and fit.
Young and fit. And do you remember Michael Collins the day he was shot, hearing about it?
I do.
You would have been 7 years of age?
Yeah. We had no television or wireless at that time, but I said it was the Bush telegraph. It spread right away through the country.
Yeah, people, one person telling the next.
Yeah.
And so you would have heard the following day. He died in the evening around 8 o'clock, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you would have heard it the following
day.
Yeah. And were people very, very shocked?
Ah, sure they were. I remember the older people that were crying. Yeah.
So they were crying here today?
They were, but it was one of the greatest tragedies that happened was the death of Michael Collins. If Michael Collins wasn't shot at that time, I have the feeling we'd have a different country. And he wasn't tired of fighting at that time. He'd still have to get concessions as regards the North. He'd have to get more. Yeah.
He would have carried the fight to
He
the
would
north.
have carried the fight to the North, and they'd even, have negotiations with him so that he'd get a lot more.
Yes.
I have the feeling that you was of a different country if it hadn't happened.
Yeah. And what do you think of Helen Hoare said some years ago that Michael Collins was a hero because he in wartime, but that maybe it would have been a lot more difficult to be a hero as you know in peacetime and to put up with the politics.
I mean, number one, the Civil War should not have happened. The treaty was accepted in a majority of 7. So I hold De Valera responsible for the people that died on both sides. It shouldn't have happened. Civil War. Majority rule is majority rule.
And De Valera sent Michael Collins to England. That was to
yeah, but yeah. He wouldn't go.
He wouldn't go because
he knew what was coming.
Yeah, and that a treaty would
yeah,
have to be...
and the treaty didn't amount to nothing signed by Michael Collins until it was ratified by Béal. And it was ratified at a majority of 7.
Yeah.
Which was big enough.
Yeah. So... there's a lot of...
I saw plenty of the Black and Tan.
Did you? Yeah.
I saw all the Civil War.
And do you remember the Black and Tans? Do you remember?
I saw the lorries, I saw them on the road.
And how did it affect you at home? Were your parents, you know, when the Black and Tans
well, they were afraid to have lights in the houses at night that Black and Tans might fire and them dancing.
So that if there was a light in the window, they were liable to fire in the window?
Yeah. Yeah.
So people were really under siege?
Oh, they were. Oh, they were.
And did anybody on the run ever come to your house looking for...
we kept plenty of them.
Did you?
We had to get out of our beds and make room for them with all hours in it. Yeah.
And because you were young and you didn't realise how dangerous it was.
No, but we had to... I remember they getting meat, frying meat from all hours of the night coming in.
Yeah.
And we'd have to double up in beds to make room for.
Yeah, yeah. So you met them all, but of course you'd be well warned then you couldn't let on that they had stayed in your house. You could never talk about it. No, because it was very dangerous.
Well, in later years, Hitler's bombs dropped very close to me.
Yeah, so you were used to danger from youth.
He failed to get me.
He did. Yeah. So you were in England during the time of World War II?
All during the war.
Yeah. And when did you come back to Ireland then?
Christmas 47.
You came back to live in Kilcommon?
Yeah, I bought a farm back.
So you had made the price of the farm in England?
Well, I did.
Good man, but you worked hard for it.
I did, that's what kept me alive.
Yeah.
Hard work.
Hard work.
I worked 600 feet under the ground.
In making what?
During the war, we were building an underground factory in this mine outside Bláth.
Gosh.
And when you come up in the morning, you could write a letter home with your spit.
So this now again, till I think about it. Your spit would be so black.
Black. From the fumes of diesel engines running in a confined space.
Yeah. So while you were in England, there was no difficulty getting work.
Well, when I went in 1935, there was more walking the road than there was working.
England?
I saw the socks coming through the boot, through the soldiers' boot, of men from walking the road.
In England?
In England.
In England.
But I never walked the road.
So had you some connection that you got a job immediately?
I was lucky enough to get a job.
Yeah.
And I was a hardy lad, and if I wasn't a hardy lad, you'd be walking the tar road in an hour.
You would, yeah. And had you people over there belonging to you when you went there?
No, nobody.
So you were 4 from 13?
Well, I had friends. I had a couple of friends.
19 when you went? You were 19 when you went?
Yeah.
Yeah. So was it an awful change to leave from Kilcommon?
Well, sure it was. Somebody that was never before on a boat or a train.
How far had you been before you went to England?
As far as the bike could take me.
Aye. So you went, we'll say, to Tralee?
Yeah.
But you didn't hit for Dublin or anything?
No.
And then you how did you go to England? You went on the train to Dublin?
I got first time going on the train, but I got a ticket from Cork to Fishguard for an excursion. 32 and 8 was the normal single fare. 22 and 6 a return. I got a ticket from Cork to Paddington.
Aye.
I could come home again a couple of days after, but I didn't come back.
But you were covering your tracks in case you wanted. Yeah. So to arrive at Paddington Station, was it an awful...
Well, from a lad from way out in the mountains, it was, sure.
It was, yeah. And you, as you say, you got a job straight away. Where did you start working?
It was a new estate 20 miles north of London, and I was lucky enough to get in there.
Yeah, building an estate. Yeah. And you knew the war was coming even in 1933?
Well, no, not at that time. 38 was the first big war scare, like.
Yeah.
It started in 39.
Yeah.
In 38, you could notice was
that
on the horizon.
Yeah. And was there ever any, did they try to get you into the British Army at any time?
I was supposed to, anybody resident in the country for 2 years was supposed to automatically sign on British.
Yeah.
I don't know the right to tell this, but I came back and I went over in a different name.
Oh, that's how you escaped. Well, that was a cute Kerry man. And you escaped then? Yeah.
But you had to go for a centre and keep very quiet when you weren't in a war.
Yeah. So you wouldn't
the Minister of Labour, he was controlled at the time by the Minister of Labour, so that's how he got underground.
Yeah. And so therefore you wouldn't be out having feeds of drink and making noise, no? You kept your head down.
You had to keep quiet.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't like that.
But it was for a good purpose. Keep out of the army. So you lived in outside Bláth, was it for all during the war?
Well, I was up in London for a part of it, but I was moved up to Bláth.
Yeah. And were you in London while they were bombing London?
I was. A lot of them fell around me there.
Gosh. And were you petrified?
Well, they were glad to be alive.
Yeah. Every morning you'd wake up. Yeah.
You know.
And when you'd walk out, you'd see where bombs had fallen.
And the doodle bugs coming over, you know.
Yeah.
From Germany. And they'd cut out before they'd fall.
Yeah.
You'd hear them cutting out and you was wondering were they going to come down here or across the road.
Must have been very stressful.
Choice too.
Yeah. So you were well paid, of course. Anybody that worked in.
Well, the money actually didn't get big until after the war.
Didn't it?
Yeah.
When they started to rebuild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was working as a bricklayer now in the Higgins aerodrome after the war in London, and my pay was only £0.50 an hour. That was just after.
Yeah. And what were you paying then for, we'd say, for rent and that?
Well, camps.
Oh, you were
in what camps? I was in some of the roughest work camps.
Under canvas?
Huh?
Under canvas?
No, they were huts. All
like army huts?
Yeah.
And you lived...
Oh, they were rough.
But like that, still you were young?
We ate a lot of horse flesh.
Oh, please.
No. That was what you'd see advertised for human consumption only.
Yeah.
I ate a lot of horses. You know, when they were up with mashed potatoes and gravy, you wouldn't ask what colour they were.
Yeah. And anyway, you were hungry.
Yeah.
And was the rationing? Do you remember the rationing?
Oh yeah, the ration book. It was about so much.
And you were.
But if it wasn't the camps, you had to hand in your ration book to the company.
All right, and they provided the food then.
Yeah.
So you survived the war, thank God, and you saved your money because you couldn't drink it because you had to stay quiet.
That's right.
Yeah. And you came home then in 1947.
That's right.
And you bought a farm in Kilcommon. And do you mind telling me what that farm cost then?
Well, I'll tell you, that's a good story now too. I bought a farm of 56 acres for 400, and there was a slate house there, for £450.
That's a
and I wouldn't sell it to you today. I'd say, well, 250,000.
It's worth, yeah. And the house and all on it?
Well, I liked a good house. This was an old farmhouse.
Yeah.
But I built a new two-story house. I built it myself. I'm a stonemason.
All right, yeah.
And I'm an electrician.
Ah, sure.
And a plumber.
You were a great bargain.
Jack of all trades. I does a bit of everything.
Yeah. And did you marry?
I did.
Oh, well, I was going to say it would be a sin if you hadn't. Because you were a bargain to any woman. Yeah.
I did. I had 6 children, 3 girls and 3 boys.
And was your wife from that area, from Kilcommon?
So in England I met her, but she only lived a half a mile out from me at home.
All right. So you came home and you got married then? So that was why you came home to Billy.
Well,
you see, you weren't telling us the whole story. There was a bit of romance in your soul.
Well.
And you came home and got married and had 6 children.
That's right.
And did you work apart from the farm then?
I worked putting down pumps and wiring houses and plumbing and building with stone. That man there will tell you.
John Mangan?
Yeah.
Yeah. So was John your apprentice in years to come?
Well, I met him nearly every week.
Yeah.
We lived close together.
All right, yeah.
I had a grandson up in Cork City in the Guards. You know, he's in Limerick at the moment.
All right. So you're 6 children then, you're 3 girls and 3 boys. And tell us about those.
Some of them married, some of them didn't.
Yeah.
A couple of the boys didn't. I have a girl, she's a nurse back in the Beaufort home.
Yeah.
I have a girl of a supermarket in Fan 4. Do you know that?
I know the supermarket in Fan 4, yes.
The next time we're crossing now, go in and tell her to give her a donut and a mug
and a mug of coffee on her father.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt. I will. And the boys didn't marry. And have they all these trades that you have? Oh, please. That's a sin that they're not married.
You don't have to learn it as a kind of a duke.
Yes, yeah. It was in your blood and you were able to pass it on.
Like music or anything like that now, you know.
Yeah. So you're a great man and you're living away. Is your wife still living?
No, she died about 3-4 years ago.
Oh, Lord mercy. Yeah. And you're living at home now with the boys?
One of the boys.
Right.
And there's a boy across the road and there's a girl across the road. So. And I play cards 4 nights a week.
Ah, well, there's nothing wrong with you, so you get out. Yeah. And you come here every year?
And I drive a car around.
Do you?
I do.
Around into Killarney and...
I can go anywhere I like.
That's great. Yeah. So you're a great man and you've great health. And God bless you.
Thanks, Peter.
Okay, Pat, it was lovely meeting you. And many years more life to
you. Your program now, where does that operator come out?
Oh, well, we'll have to talk about it. We'll make sure you get to see it anyway. Yeah?
Right.
You'll be a celebrity in your old age.
Right.
But it was lovely meeting you. Yeah, and we'll see you here next